Hey everyone, Dr. Brent Siebold here with Make It Happen at Arizona State University. We get together weekly to talk about tips and tricks to make change in the world. And today I'm super excited to introduce my friend and colleague, Dan Visa, to talk about the power of mentorship right on cue here. Dan, thanks for joining us. Dan and I co-teach an undergraduate class called Entrepreneurship and Value Creation at Arizona State University. So in that vein, really anxious to hear about Dan's take on mentorship, because he's a great mentor to not only me, but many hundreds of students over the past several years that he's been involved in our course. And I'm sure he's benefited himself throughout his professional career as an innovator from mentors who strive to pay it forward in our society and our economy. So Dan, without further ado, welcome and thanks for being here.
No, thanks, Brent. You give a great introduction. So for everybody that's on the call, I'm Dan Visa. As Brent mentioned, I help him out in his entrepreneurship and value creation class as what they call a pro TA. I'm not going to go into a lot of boring details about my background here. I'll let you read my LinkedIn profile, which I think was on the email for the registration of this particular session. I've got like 7 slides. I think I'll go through them, in 15, 20 minutes and leave us, plenty of time to chat afterwards. But let me tell you a little bit about, how I, ended up here, right? Talking to you and specifically talking about mentorship. I went through university myself. I did very well through the engineering program at Rochester Institute of Technology and graduated with high honors. And, upon graduation, I thought pretty highly of myself, as I think I had every right to, having, excelled in the academic world. And I went into the workplace and, over the course of time discovered, there were a lot of other people that were just as smart. Many of them were smarter. They were more talented, and they were just as hardworking. And so, not that comes as any particular surprise, but it started the wheels turning for me as to, okay, well, what's it going to take for me to succeed in the workplace? I was working for a Fortune 500 company, working hard, working in interesting and innovative areas. Doing very well for a number of different years. But it wasn't until I started work as a corporate strategist, as an executive in a corporate strategy office for another Fortune 500 company, that became acutely aware of the differences amongst some of the executives and the leaders that I was working with. These were C-suite executives. These were business unit leaders. And while they were all in positions of leadership, it was very clear to me that there are very different styles, very different results, and certainly not all were created equal, even though they may have shared similar titles. So, and I began to appreciate that even though they were successful in their own right, that those that really succeeded had certain values, qualities, and most importantly, behaviors that were unlike their peers or those of us who are still sort of striving for some of those lofty perches. So today what we're going to talk about is my view of mentoring and mentorship and why it's important, and some of the ways in which each of you and each of us can invest your time in developing relationships to develop what I call a high functioning capability, or becoming a high functioning person. All right. So, many people have no idea what a mentor is or what a mentor does. I would consider myself to have been one for a long period of time, until I started to observe, some of these differences in terms of how certain people were becoming or had enjoyed success or continued to enjoy success on a more consistent basis. And it's not, this is a funny little, intro slide here. It's not to poke fun at the fact that, some of us may not know or understand or have a complete understanding of what mentorship is. And it certainly doesn't necessarily mean that, the person delivering the mentorship also has no idea what it is. But there's a general vagueness to it, and that vagueness, I think, is somewhat well deserved. Um, if you do a Google search, or you start, starting to dig in the way in which a lot of us start to try to learn about things, we refer to the internet, and start doing searches. Google's got hundreds of millions of listings for what is a mentor. You can look up the Webster's dictionary version of what a mentor is. The purpose of this discussion, though, isn't to disparage or discount any of those. They all serve their own purpose. They all have the means by which to help people, achieve something or become a little bit better at something. Whether it's coaching and what some consider to be mentoring within the workplace, getting people comfortable with their environment if you're a new grad, helping understand or execute to policies, in a workplace environment, picking up new skills, whatever that might be. Those are all legitimate ways of helping people get better at what they do, right? Whether it's in the workplace or outside of the workplace. What I'm really talking about here, though, is perhaps best summed up by maybe putting a table out or a question to you, which is, when you're facing a significant challenge in work or outside of work, and that challenge has significant consequences. Consequences could be monetary in nature. Consequences could be risk in nature. Consequences could be impacting somebody else with the outcome. Where do you go to get guidance or input as to how to tackle that challenge? And whether it's in the workplace or outside the workplace, we all have probably faced those types of challenges. I will assure you, if you haven't, you will, right? Because that's just what life does, right? It throws us these gut punches from time to time in and out of the workplace. So, we're going to kind of, focus the discussion on the workplace environment, but recognize that what we're talking about here is about developing, ourselves as whole people, and it's certainly translatable, outside of the workplace. So when I'm talking about mentoring, I'm talking about personal characteristics that help you to be developed as a person in a way that goes, well beyond the coaching or the teaching of skills. We're talking about developing personal characteristics. But what does a mentor do, or what characteristics does the mentor and the mentee share between them? Certainly, it stands to reason that trust is, principal amongst them. If you're faced with significant decisions that you're being made to ask in the course of your business responsibilities, or if the consequences of those decisions or actions, have significant impact, perhaps to you or perhaps to others, or financially, you want to trust that the input you're getting is trustworthy and important, and I think interlocked with the trustworthiness of the person that's providing that to you is the integrity that by which they deliver it. So, what do we mean by integrity? Well, is it is beyond trustworthy? Is it coming from a point that you can relate to with regards to the values or the principles that the person who's providing it is delivering it from? In addition to that, you've got the element of judgment. Judgment, you can read the definition there. I'll give you a slightly different version of it, which is, judgment is the ability to provide guidance based on having failed judgment in the past. So, our mistakes, or a person's mistakes, lead them to learn what they should have done, and ideally to act on that, in the future. So people with good judgment typically are people who've had, a lot of stumbles and mistakes of their own, but they've discovered how not to make those mistakes in the future. And so there's a tremendous value when you're thinking about, the sorts of challenges that come not just from being a senior leader in a company or an organization, but in the conduct of your day-to-day responsibilities as an employee, or as being the primary caretaker of your career. And then the last thing is actually something that mentors do, which is they provide that counsel, right? And if you think of, where most of us use the word counseling, maybe in the legal sense, you go to get advice or help on a particular legal matter, but really what they're doing is they're giving you a recommended course of action. Now, you don't have to take that course of action, but it's another input for you to put into the composition of how you're making decisions and how you're acting out on those decisions. So, as I mentioned before, I come from the business world. I used to be an engineer. I'm not an organizational behavioralist. I'm certainly not a psychologist. So where do I get my information from? Well, a certain amount of it is from my own personal experience. It's from my work as a corporate strategist and having observed the working behaviors and activities of a pretty significant number of senior executives. But I also turned to a very publicly available source of, I think, very meaningful data, and that's in the Wall Street Journal. They publish a periodic piece, a series, if you will, called the Personal Board of Directors. And the composition of this article is an interview with a senior executive in some industry. And they describe, 4 people who they consider to comprise their personal board of directors. Why is it their personal board of directors? It's because they're giving them that counsel. They're relying on the trust and judgment and the integrity of these individuals to help them in 3 important ways. They help them to determine how to get input, to deal with decisions and issues and challenges that they're working on resolving. They help them to develop how they think about the nature of the challenge or the logic that they're trying to use to come to an answer. And they help them determine how best to act. And so if you look at these characteristics are what I pulled out of the interviews over the course of the past year that were published in the Wall Street Journal. There was roughly 120 different characteristics by my count, 75% of which, were behavioral in nature. And so let's just pause there and consider, what does that mean? You're talking to leaders of corporations, higher education institutions, and other, business executives, and the preponderance of guidance that they get from the people that they trust the most and who give them the benefit of their judgment and their counsel are behavioral in nature. Nothing to do with the business itself, nothing to do with strategy, finance, marketing, engineering, or the nuts and bolts and the blocking and tackling of whatever line of business or organization they might be leading. They have to do with, how do I behave? How do I think? How do I act? And I think that that's a really important thing to understand, not because it comes automatically, but because it's indicative of the nature of the relationship that you're out there seeking from a mentor. This is a highly personal interaction, a highly personal relationship that you're looking to build with an individual or a group of individuals to give you the benefit of their experience. And so it stands to reason that because the outcome of that is, behavioral in nature, that you're going to get these types of characteristics. The other thing I'll say about this particular page is the items that are highlighted in red were those that were mentioned most often. So showing up in multiple of the different interviews, and the ones that were that are in bold here rather are those that were the most frequent of the most frequent, if you will. And so just take a minute to take a look at that. Communications, always important in and outside of the workplace. Confidence, how does one have confidence in the decision in which they're taking? people, myriad of different, issues pertaining to the treatment of people, the interacting with people, leading people, et cetera. Thinking like a particular, putting yourself in another's shoes, if you will, I think was the main mention there. And then values. Values are the framework by which we, compare the decisions that we're trying to make and how well they fit our structure of values. And so bouncing off of other people, the decisions and the methods and how you're thinking about things in order to come to these decisions clearly needs to take into account, the attributes of the values that you and the other person hold. So, maybe to the closing shot here. So, what does it mean? I mean, how do we find mentors, and where are they out in this great, big, huge world that we operate in? And I think, before going through the litany here, let's remind ourselves again of something I said earlier, which is, this is a relationship building activity, and as such, it deserves to be approached in that manner. It's not something that you can approach as transactional. It's not something that just shows up on your door without any effort on your part. And that leads to, the first of these 3 points. It's a purposeful act. You have to decide that that's a relationship and a type of input in an interaction that you want or you need, okay? It's not just going to show up and present itself. I mean, I had this naive belief, early on in my career that someone was going to see me as a person worth investing in, that someone was going to see that I was, smart and talented and had, lots of effort to give, and they did, but it didn't necessarily mean that they were going to take me under their wing and give me the counsel that could have helped me more fully develop. I had to go out and find that. Okay. The second part is, how do you engage? And there's actually a principle at work here that's called Cialdini's reciprocity principle. If you don't know who Cialdini is, look in your own backyard. He's actually a Regents Professor Emeritus of Psychology at ASU. And he came up with this principle. I mean, it's a fairly simple and obvious one when you stop and think about it, which is you're trying to engender reciprocity with somebody else. And so the way in which you do that is you give something to that other person. You give something that they need. You engender yourself to the person that you're trying to start a relationship with. And if you stop and think about it, in any other form of our of our life, that makes sense. If I want to develop a friendship with somebody, I don't start asking them for things. I give something to them, and if it's mutual, then you will start to receive back. And so it's really just a very fundamental a cornerstone to developing a relationship. And the third is just, you have to let the relationship build over time. You don't establish trust instantaneously. Trust is earned over time, as we, I think, all know and can appreciate. The clarity of the judgment that another party has comes out over time. Their values and how you can put into context the input that you're receiving and compare it to your own set of values and what you need in order to be able to make decisions or act on the challenges that you're facing in your career or in your workplace, all need to take time. So recognize that there's no magic here. The magic is in having an interpersonal relationship with somebody that is fruitful for both parties. So I'll just close with this last little comic strip here, and hopefully you can appreciate the humor here of establishing a mentorship that clearly benefits you in a very explicit way, but sometimes it's not as explicit as this. Okay.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Dan. We really appreciate your time and energy here. What a great topic. It has so many ramifications for early stage innovators who are looking to affect change, but know that that process is not a solo journey in most cases. So really appreciate these ideas and really excited about engaging in a deeper conversation. Sorry if you can hear my kids in the background. They want to get involved too. So with that, I'll end today's session. We've got a round of applause going virtually for Dan Visa. Dan, thank you so much. And we'll catch you during the Q&A session. Thanks again.
All right.